My mom became a parent at just 19, a young age to take on such big responsibilities. Despite the challenges, she was determined to give me the best life she could. She worked tirelessly, often holding down multiple jobs to ensure we had what we needed. Over time, she saved enough to afford her own apartment and a car, managing her bills meticulously and always creating a stable home for us. Thankfully, both my mom's and dad's families were supportive, often helping to watch me when my mom had to work. However, their availability didn't always line up with her schedule, so she had to rely on babysitters. She made flyers and posted them around popular spots and cafes, hoping someone would respond. Eventually, she found a wonderful babysitter named Rachel, which eased some of her stress. I've always been the type of person who loves hearing stories about my childhood, even the small, everyday details. I enjoy learning about the funny, memorable moments, and the unexpected challenges my mom faced. One such story came as a complete surprise to me when I was in high school, during my junior year. After one of my volleyball games, my mom and I were walking to her car, laughing about something, when a woman stopped us. She was the school janitor, someone I had noticed in passing before but had never really interacted with. That evening, she seemed unusually excited to see me. She reached out and put her arm around my waist, saying, "I know you. I used to babysit you when you were just a tiny baby. We were like best friends." Her words left me confused. I had no memory of her. Before I could say anything, my mom quickly ushered me to the car, clearly uncomfortable. The ride home was completely silent, and I didn't press her about it at the time. But the encounter stayed on my mind, and I eventually brought it up with my mom in a more casual way, hoping to get answers. Reluctantly, my mom opened up and shared a story that left me stunned. When she was looking for babysitters for me as a baby, the woman who had approached us that night had responded to her flyer. She and my mom had attended the same school, and since we lived in a small, rural town, the woman even knew where my mom lived. When my mom decided not to hire her, the woman became fixated on both of us. She started calling my mom every day, showing up at her work, and even waiting outside our house to convince her to change her mind. She went as far as writing letters and leaving them in our mailbox. Then, one day, my mom woke up from a nap to find the woman sitting on the living room floor, playing with me as I laughed happily. My mom was terrified. She never explained how the woman had managed to get into the house or how long she had been coming over, but it clearly shook her. I suspect she might have moved, gotten a restraining order, or contacted the police, maybe all three. Even now, I understand why that memory unsettled her so deeply. When I was about 13 or 14, I used to babysit two boys who lived nearby. I had watched them a few times before, so their parents felt comfortable leaving me in charge. One night, they were heading to a church event that was expected to go late, until around 2:30 in the morning. Since it was a church-related activity, I offered to babysit for free, thinking of it as a small way to help out. The family lived in a small apartment complex with 2 floors, each section housing 4 units. Their apartment was on the ground floor, making it convenient to come and go. It had 2 bedrooms, one on each side of the unit, with the kitchen and dining area to the left as you entered, and the living room to the right. The living room had a sliding glass door leading to a small patio where the kids often played during the day. By around 1:30 a.m., I had finally gotten the boys to sleep after plenty of pleading and reading them 3 bedtime stories. With my homework finished and no cable TV, I picked the land before time from their small collection of DVDs and VHS tapes to help pass the time. Exhausted, I found myself dozing off in the dimly lit living room. At about 2 a.m., a knock at the front door startled me awake. Knowing the parents had a key, I stayed still and quiet, uneasy about who might be knocking at such a late hour. The apartment was silent except for the low hum of the TV, and the knock came again. My unease grew, and I decided to grab a baseball bat that was lying near the couch, just in case. Then, something happened that sent a chill down my spine. I heard a soft, almost sing-song voice, like a young woman's, say, "Oh dear, that won't help you." My heart froze. Suddenly, I realized I hadn't closed the blinds on the patio door. Turning slowly, I saw a shadowy figure standing outside, staring directly into the apartment. The person was hard to make out, but they appeared unusually short and wide. I screamed and ran into the kids' bedroom, slamming the door behind me. The boys were still asleep, blissfully unaware of the danger. In my panic, I realized I didn't have a cell phone, and there was no cordless phone in the house. Desperate, I pushed a dresser in front of the door to barricade us inside. Then, I saw the figure move past the window, casting a dark shadow. The knocking started again, this time on the bedroom window. The same voice called out, "Come on, dearie, I won't hurt you. Please come out." The knocking grew louder, and I feared the glass might shatter. The boys woke up, terrified and screaming, which only added to my panic. I felt powerless to protect them. Just when I thought the situation couldn't get worse, I heard a man's voice yell, "Hey! Who the hell are you?" The figure outside immediately ran off. Moments later, the front door opened, and the boy's father came rushing to the bedroom door, calling out to me. Relief washed over me as I let him and the mother in, moving the dresser back to its place. When I explained what had happened, they called the police, who arrived quickly to search the area. Although they didn't find anyone, they did notice that the bushes near the patio had been trampled, as if someone had forced their way through to get closer to the door. I babysat for the family one more time after that, but they moved away about 5 months later. I never babysat for anyone again after that night. It was an experience I'll never forget. When I was about 17, I lived in a small village of roughly 1,200 people. Every year, the entire community looked forward to a big festival. It was the highlight of the year. Adults gathered at the town hall for a night of dinner, plays, and fun, often poking fun at the most notable events of the year. Laughter and good cheer filled the air. The festival usually took place in February, with snow covering the ground and early sunsets making the evenings dark and cold. For teenagers between 13 and 17, it was a busy time babysitting since most parents attended the event. Since my friends and I were too young to join the party, we had to be 18, we came up with a different plan. We decided to offer rides to the event in my friend's car, acting as the village's unofficial taxi service. Without taxis in the area, plenty of people were happy to pay us a little for the convenience. It was a smart way to make some extra money. As we drove people to the town hall, some parents asked us to check on their houses as well, just to make sure everything was fine. I think they wanted peace of mind and also to keep us busy until they needed rides home later. While driving through one of the older parts of the village, where the streetlights were dim, we passed a house belonging to a single mom we'd given a ride to earlier. She had 3 kids, around 2, 4, and 8 years old, and her 15-year-old niece was babysitting them. It was around 10 p.m., and the area was quiet, surrounded by hills and cliffs. As we drove past the house, my friend thought he saw something move in the garden. We joked that it was probably just a cat and continued driving to the other side of the village. But the friend in the back seat couldn't shake a bad feeling. He convinced us to turn back and check for footprints in the snow near the house. When we arrived and peeked over the fence, our suspicions were confirmed. Fresh human footprints were visible in the snow, leading around the house. The tracks went by each window, stopping as if someone had been looking inside. We followed the trail until it disappeared onto the street, where a snowplow had recently passed. We debated what to do. Since the footprints didn't lead to the front or back doors, we decided to split up. 2 of us stayed in the area to keep an eye on the house while the driver headed to the police station, planning to pick up the mom on the way back. About 5 minutes after the driver left, we spotted a man crouched behind a garage a few houses down. He was completely still, holding a small camera in his hands. After a while, he stood, glanced around nervously, and started walking toward the house. His movements were deliberate, as if he didn't want to be noticed. When he reached the backyard, he began making his way toward the back door. We didn't have time to think. My friend and I ran through the neighboring yards, cutting through gardens to intercept him. Just as he reached for the back door, we shouted for him to stop. Startled, he turned and bolted. We gave chase, sprinting after him down the snowy street. I remember the adrenaline coursing through me. My heart was pounding, and all I could think about was catching him without slipping on the icy ground. As we neared the end of the street, I saw a sharp 90-degree turn ahead. I decided to cut across the snow-covered grass to block him at the turn, but my plan failed. He managed the turn without slowing down, while I struggled to keep my pace in the deep snow. I fell behind, but my friend was gaining on him. Seeing an opportunity, my friend tripped him by kicking his legs. The man fell hard, hitting his head on the frozen ground. He was knocked out cold. We checked his pockets and found a small broken camera. Minutes later, our driver returned with the mom, followed by the police. An ambulance arrived shortly after to take the man away. When we explained what happened, my friend admitted to tripping him, but the police chief just smiled and said, "The way I see it, you three heroes caught a burglar, and he fell while running away." He gave us a knowing nod, as if to say our version of events was good enough for him. Even now, thinking back on that night creeps me out. It was clear the man had planned everything. He knew about the festival, that the mom was a single parent, and even where to go to avoid being seen. It was too well thought out, and the calculated nature of it still sends shivers down my spine. This experience still unsettles me whenever I think about it, and I can't fully explain what happened. I live in a safe neighborhood, which makes it even stranger. It's a reminder that you can never be too careful. At the time, my nephew was about 5 years old. His parents had plans that evening and asked me to babysit. It was my first time watching a child on my own, and I wasn't entirely sure what to do. I decided to keep things simple and set him up with Netflix in the living room, thinking that would keep him entertained. We went to the kids section and picked a show about talking cars. It was around 5 p.m., and the sun was still up. The couch faced a sliding glass door, and the curtain was open, giving us a clear view of the backyard. I sat down with my nephew, and we watched the show together. He loved it, laughing at some of the silly scenes, which encouraged me to keep watching with him. Hours passed, and soon it was dark outside. I turned on the lights inside but forgot to close the curtain. From outside, anyone could see in clearly, but from inside, all I could see was darkness. Our backyard borders a large field with no streetlights, so it was pitch black beyond the glass. Suddenly, I heard the sound of a deck chair being dragged across the wooden deck. I recognized the sound immediately but assumed it must be my parents. I didn't stop to question why they would come home quietly and start moving furniture around at night. It didn't seem odd at the time because we live in such a quiet, safe area. My nephew and I continued watching TV for another hour before it was time for bed. After turning off the TV, I helped my nephew get ready for bed and walked him to his room. On the way, I noticed my parents were indeed home. Feeling curious, I casually asked if they had been out on the deck earlier. They both said no, which made me pause. Something about that didn't sit right. Feeling uneasy, I went to the kitchen and switched on the light for the backyard. Peeking through the window, I saw something that sent a chill down my spine. One of the deck chairs, usually arranged neatly around the outdoor table, had been moved. It was now positioned about 5 to 10 feet away from its normal spot, placed directly in front of the sliding glass door. The chair was facing the window and was less than a foot away from the glass. What made it even creepier was how deliberately it seemed placed. It looked as though someone had intentionally pulled the chair up to sit and watch through the opening in the curtains. From that spot, whoever was there could have seen me and my nephew on the couch, clear as day. The next morning, I discovered something even stranger. On my bedroom window, I found 2 large handprints. The fingers were spread wide, and the prints looked fresh, as if someone had pressed their hands firmly against the glass. What unsettled me most was the location of the window. It was on the first floor, and there was no easy way to reach it from outside. Thankfully, that room had been my brother's before it was mine. Because he had a history of sneaking people in, my parents had installed strong locks that made it impossible to open the window, no matter how hard you tried. Still, the thought of someone being that close while I was inside terrified me. Years have passed since that night, and I haven't noticed anything unusual since. But the memory still lingers, and it taught me an important lesson: I always make sure to close the curtains after dark.